Modern Pokemon is missing something that we have now not seen in 16 years. Back in 2007 and even earlier, Pokemon games were far more graphically limited than they are nowadays, mainly consisting of two-dimensional sprites on handheld consoles such as the Game Boy or the DS. However, when it came to battling with your Pokemon, it felt like these handheld consoles came up a little bit short. So the Pokemon Company had to come up with a way to make the battling aspects of these games a bit more graphically impressive. And what was the easiest way to do this? Well, why not introduce battle simulators to the 3D Pokemon games? This is what we are discussing today as we talk about the Pokemon battle simulators. And buckle up because we are first going to talk about the main battle simulators and then move into what happened to them. So let's start at the beginning and go back 25 years ago to 1998. Pokemon in 1998 looked very different. 3D graphics on a Game Boy were a joke. No one would ever get 3D polygon graphics onto a handheld console. It was completely impossible. So the Pokemon Company decided to enlist the help of Nintendo 64's console and create Pokemon Stadium. Pokemon Stadium was, as you would expect, just a standard battle simulator for the N64, designed to make those who just enjoyed the battling of aspect of Pokemon have an even better experience. And the best part, you could transfer Pokemon from your Game Boy games into the N64 title, meaning the Pokemon you had befriended throughout your playthrough of Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow could be brought onto a different console to have a more personalized battling experience. The game recently came to Nintendo Switch Online and expansion pack N64 emulator, and quite recently I actually bought a version for my N64, and I must say, I had a really good time playing this. The game is very simple, but still challenging. The battle AI is better in this than it is in most of the mainline Pokemon games. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Pokemon X and Y. I feel like Pokemon Stadium was a bit of an experiment done by the Pokemon Company to try and figure out whether 3D battle simulators would be popular. And well, the game did perform pretty well. IGN gave the game a ranking of 8.2 out of 10 and called the game a must-play for Pokemon fans. And you know what? Yes, it is. The only major drawback IGN found with the game was the audio was kind of subpar compared to the other iconic N64 Nintendo games, such as Mario 64 and Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. In fact, most people found the announcer to be one of the more irritating parts, which makes sense given the announcer had very limited voice line.
Savage attack! Major damage! The crowd's excitement is building over this hot battle.
Anyway, let's talk about how it sold. After getting pretty great game reviews, the game had gone to perform very well. In its first month, the game sold 1 million copies, which for a video game in the late 90s was not an easy feat. In total, there were 4 million copies of Pokemon Stadium sold, with most of these being in the States. And then in 2000, the game would be declared a player's choice game due to its popularity. As for the actual gameplay within Pokemon Stadium, there were fun little mini games that you could play within the title. These mini games were simplistic, and a couple of them were basically just copy and pasted from Mario Party. However, I will give credit to the HAL Lab team, since they evidently had to think about making the game fun for people who did not have Pokemon they could put into the game. While yes, you could battle without importing Pokemon in the game, it didn't really have the same connection to fans. Pokemon Stadium started it all. The very concept of the 3D battle simulator began with this game. So what do you do when you make a successful video game in the late 90s? You release a sequel. Now let's move into Pokemon Stadium 2, the direct sequel to Pokemon Stadium, that now also incorporated the Pokemon from the Generation 2 games Gold, Silver, and Crystal. The game's main features were basically the same as Pokemon Stadium. You had mini games, a battle simulator, and the ability to move Pokemon from the Game Boy into these games. Other than that, not much innovation was done to the game. There were slightly better animations, of course. There were some newer voice lines and better sound design to try and rectify this from the prior game. So how did the game perform? Well, about the same, to be honest. It performed a little bit worse than the original, but was still a pretty solid game. IGN gave the game a 7.5 out of 10. However, this time the reviewer did comment on the fact that if you had not played the Game Boy games, you would not have the same experience playing Pokemon Stadium 2 as someone who did. And now the reviewers could take this more into account as Pokemon was becoming far more mainstream than it was in the original generation. Pokemon Stadium 2 did not perform as well as the first Pokemon Stadium and sold half the units that Pokemon Stadium did, which is a shame as it basically was just an upgraded and updated version of Pokemon Stadium. But this meant that people who did not play Pokemon games on the handheld Game Boy would really understand that the game is meant to be an extension of the Gen 2 games. However, the N64 would come and go, followed by the one and only GameCube. Now, they had really fixed all the problems here. Technically, Pokemon Colosseum can be seen as a battle simulator somewhat. However, where this game performs much better is that it had that standalone story. But we're not here to talk about that today. Instead, we need to talk about the battle simulator aspect of the game. Pokemon Colosseum obviously had the same features as Pokemon Stadium, with the ability to implement Pokemon from the Game Boy Advance games and then battle with them in a quick battle mode. This game was the third generation's version of Pokemon Stadium. However, the battle simulator version of this was kind of ignored. Pokemon Colosseum was such an amazing game that you would play it without ever needing to even go near the battle simulator part of the game. But now we need to move into the best Pokemon battle simulator they ever made. Released in 2007, Pokemon Battle Revolution was designed to be a blast to the past for fans of the old Pokemon Stadium games. This was the first ever Pokemon game to release internationally for the Wii, and more impressively, the first Wii game to ever use Wi-Fi connectivity. The game incorporates the best of both the Pokemon Stadium games and Pokemon Colosseum. The game features 11 Colosseums, which you have to battle your way through, each with different challenges and difficulty, and then a final fight against a Colosseum leader. As said, the game really did incorporate the best of Pokemon Colosseum and Pokemon Stadium. The only major difference that did not come through from Colosseum was the story mode, but the game didn't really need it. The game went back to the simple times of the N64 and transferring Pokemon into the N64. However, the ability to do this from Generation 4 games on the DS wirelessly to the Wii made it far more attainable for the average Pokemon player. Even 8-year-old me could do this. I mean, it was clearly simple enough for the players to do. Graphically, the Wii had much more power than the N64 and GameCube, which meant that every Pokemon had a unique animation within the game. And now the animations for the first time ever would show 2 Pokemon on the screen at once. Yeah, this is a bigger deal than you'd think. Pokemon Battle Revolution is iconic, but how was it received? Well, it was average. The game received a 5 by IGN. Basically, the main drawback of Pokemon Battle Revolution is that it is entirely a battle simulator again. No story mode, meaning you could only really enjoy the game if you enjoyed the battling aspect of the DS games themselves. Also, the online battling system was a little bit scuffed. It worked okay, but was very basic. It's a Wi-Fi game from 2007 though, so what do you expect? As for sales, it did even worse, selling just over 1.5 million units, meaning it sold less than Pokemon Stadium on a far more widely available console. But if it sold so badly, why do I call it the best battle simulator? Well, because it is. If you take out the single player features and go back to this just being a good battle simulator, it truly is the best version they ever released. The animations are amazing, the sound design's pretty good, I enjoy the battling aspects, and I do think it can be a challenging game at points as well. But these games all performed pretty well, so what happened? Well, let's talk about that. Pokemon games were always 2D with incredibly limited sprites. However, come Generation 5, the game series took a slightly different approach to the design of their games. The Generation 5 games were the beginning of a new era of Pokemon games. A transition to 3D graphics was on the way, and this game was the beginning. Granted, this game should have had a battle simulator come out with it. However, it didn't really need it. The game was beginning to transition to 3D, and then by the time X and Y came around, the transition to 3D was complete. There was no point throwing money at battle simulators anymore, since the games were now in 3D. Look at battling in Pokemon Scarlet. It looks even better than it ever looked in Pokemon Battle Revolution. And nowadays, the Switch is both handheld and a home console, meaning you don't need to release a game on a second console. Do I miss the battle simulator games? Well, yeah. However, you can still play them on the old consoles and still have the same level of enjoyment that you did back in the day. This is not an ad, but anyone who has not played these games, they are coming to the Switch emulators with Pokemon Stadium already available and Pokemon Stadium 2 coming later this year. It's definitely worth picking up these games and trying them, but let me know what you guys think of these. And join my Discord down below and we'll have a chat about them.